Hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Scouser podcast. It is a Monday night. We are back in action. I am your host, as always, Timuchin, here in ridiculously cold Chicago. It's just like unnecessarily cold, I have to say. It's not even snowing, it's just miserably cold. But Bickler is with us to keep us warm, get us warm. What's happening?
Yeah, well, they're predicting winter weather here, which means it's going to dip below 55 and they're going to cancel school. So, bracing myself for that and what impact that'll have on my productivity and work week.
Speaking of, Gally is not with us today because he mentioned something about getting a virus. I mean, I don't know if it was like watching porn. That's the kind of virus he got, or he's got like a cold virus. He said it's pretty miserable, actually. Hope he feels better soon, but he said it's worse than COVID, which is kind of like scary. I guess there's something going on in the East Coast, so it might come your way. Heads up. Serzi, Brian Shelton, as people gather around over here. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. Do all the sharing and liking and all that kind of good stuff. And if you are not following us on YouTube, why the hell not? Head on over to YouTube as well. But if you are listening to us as a podcast as well, please give us a share. Actually, drop a review as well. I noticed the other day, Bickler, for the first, I did not notice that there were reviews for us, but there's quite a few good reviews for us. So that was, yeah, exactly. I was shocked myself, but I'm assuming it's because of this. It's
yeah, that's exactly what it is.
It's not only a podcast about Liverpool. Okay, just because Gally is not here, the trivia festivities don't stop. Because this is one I feel like you're going to nail. Okay. Let's see. Turn the music down a little bit. As much as
I hate this, dude. I hate all of this. I hate the fact that like I don't have Gally that I can stall for and then blame it on.
That's what you hate.
I feel like I'm really exposed here out on a limb by myself. Like I don't like any of this.
Okay, no, that's an easy one. You're gonna nail this. I have faith in you. So obviously we're playing Villa away on Wednesday. So this is an easy one. Even BJ considers this an easy one. Which former Liverpool player leads the club in appearances against Villa and actually scored their debut goal against Villa?
Why is that easy?
I don't know. It's not Gerrard, so let me make it easier for you. It's not Stevie G. It's somebody else.
Did you say it's a current Liverpool player?
No, I did not. It's somebody big.
I'll say Mo Salah.
No.
I don't.
No, it's not a current player. Let's go that way. But it's somebody famous and somebody big. It's a big name.
Repeat the question one more time. Country of origin, please.
How about this? I'll blast the music instead. Okay,
all right, repeat the question one more time.
Which former Liverpool player,
and
it's not Stevie G, leads the club in appearances against Villa, and they scored their debut goal against Villa?
Oh, I'm going to go, this sounds like a striker question. See, the Rush thing, it makes sense. I was thinking like Russia, it's going to be Rusher Barnes just based on having to probably be a goal scorer.
Good guesses.
I guess if I'm going to be wrong, I'm not going to be wrong by myself. I'm going to go with Shelton. I'll say Ian Rush.
You and Brian are wrong. Serzi is actually right. Carragher. Jamie Carragher has 31 appearances against Villa, and the goal is from January 18th, 1997. Pretty bad, Serzi. Even I don't understand how people do this. I really don't. Like I remember specific games.
I know exactly how he's doing it. He's pulling a Jamie. He's Googled it.
I know it's getting more and more suspicious as he's pulling years and days and stuff like that. But
yeah, we had a yellow card in the 9th minute. I remember it.
Actually, you remembering it wrong. It is the 50th minutes, I think it was. 50th minute, 3-0 home victory.
The astounding thing about that to me is that the person scored in their debut, which instantly ruled out Carragher for me. So
No, they scored their debut goal. It wasn't their debut. It was their first goal for Liverpool.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
But
all
it
right.
is Jamie, so it's a big name for us. Obviously, it's what? It's already mid-February, man. Are you like doing any exercises to be better prepared for the 24-hour podathon this year? I don't even know if we can do any kind of prep work for that. Nothing can prepare you for 24 hours of being online.
I feel like we need to do one of those like training courses like they do in the military. Like if you get like captured behind enemy lines, like things you do, like like how to stay up for 3 days without drinking water and not answer questions. Like I mean, we have to do something like that. But answer your question, no, I've done nothing yet, so it's going to be just as much of a shit show as it was last year if I continue at this rate.
Sergi says, let's make it fun and do 48 hours. I literally can't say that is impossible. And I don't know.
That'd be fun for anybody because nobody, like, at the end of 24, people couldn't understand what was happening. Like,
the iconic moments of you saying where am I in the 23rd hour. When I asked you a question and you were like where am I is I think the iconic moments where we knew the limit is probably 24. Anything more than this could get really ugly. But yeah, we're only like 4 months, 6 months away from doing that one. Last year obviously we did $5,000 altogether, so the goal this year is Bickler.
What is the goal?
I know. I'm asking you. Set a goal, bro.
What did we do? 10 last year?
You did 5 last year. $5,000 total.
With 5 last year. So, I mean, I think realistically 10 would be the goal this year, right?
I think so, yes. I agree.
And then I think the year after we need to really swing for it and try to hit 25.
Because honestly, like last year's was more of me coming up with a crazy idea sometime middle of summer, presenting it and somehow running it through the red tape and making it happen. And then, so we'll be a lot better prepared. Hopefully we'll have more sponsors, more guests, and more like supporter clubs involved and stuff like that this year. But long time to go before then. We got bigger fish to fry earlier on over here. So let's talk about the weekend over here. I was talking to Matish this morning, and this is kind of like a weird concept, but we do this as fans, right? Like this time of year, we say, I mean, 3 points is the most important thing. And that was like the goal when we got the 3 points. And at this point, from the now until the end of the season, I don't think anybody cares if it is, ugly or not. But the funny thing is, we say that in the beginning of the season too, because we say it's early on in the season, growing pains. It'll be a while before they play well together. So really, we're only giving like the team 8 or 10 weeks to play well, which actually they did during that period, if you remember. So right now, it does not look very convincing. It looks a little bit nervous. But do you care, or like, do you take the performances now and try to project the end of the season, or you're like looking at a game at a time, like they say, and 3 points at a time? That's all that matters. 3 points, move on to the next one, ugly or not.
I mean, normally I'd say we're just taking this a week at a time, right? Throughout the season, but I think you're at the point now when you look at like 13 matches now, you start number crunching, right? So I think it's almost impossible when you get to this point in the season to start to not start to do sort of the calculations. Do I care that we're like grifting our way to 3 points right now and they're not super smooth and easy? Absolutely not. I don't really care how we get points.
Does it give you worry? Like when you look at, what I mean? Like when you look at, you're like, oh, now it's Villa City. Like I know, because some people were like, if we play like this against so-and-so, but it's not the same thing. It's different games.
Here's my concern, Mike. So does it give me some worry? If you were to ask me this question 2 weeks ago, I would have said no. But now we've been exposed to Aaron for 3 weeks. No, I'm just kidding. So like, I think my concern is this. I do have some concern where I didn't whereas I didn't like 2 or 3 weeks ago, because my concern is that this side really haven't had to come up against a real rough patch where they had to like sort of mentally plug through something. My concern with this side is right now they're getting by on some really thin margins, which you got to do to win, right? I mean, if this was a City side, we'd be praising the fact that they're getting 3 points when they're not playing their best. So I don't want to take that away from this team. But my concern is that some of these razor thin margins can start to not go your way, and then that becomes almost like it almost seems like it catches on to the rest of the side, and then you start to have like doubt starts to creep in, and it starts to become almost like a contagious thing. So like, that's my concern is like, we've been skating by sort of the skin of our teeth here. And now like those that razor thin line goes both ways, right? Like we can say it went well for us versus Wolves. We can say it bit us versus Everton. Like if we had 30 more seconds,
Yeah.
if the whistle went 30 more seconds in the match, that's a win, right? So like my concern is enough of them don't go our way, and then it becomes contagious, and like in terms of mentality for the side.
So I'm a little torn on this because honestly, when I look back on the season, I was on one of my YouTube black holes the other nights, and it was like basically like, all the goals so far this year or something, whatever, like popped up. I mean, like there are not a lot of games. I mean, the slot special is 2-0, right? And I feel like when your special is 2-0, because we don't have like in the past, if you watch those, there were some crazy games like 4-0, 5-1, and stuff like that, like during the club era, and it was like goal after goal. It's like very open, nonstop, and stuff like that. When your norm, or I don't want to say goal, but I guess when your like default setting is 2-0, it's very dangerous because when it becomes 2-1, and when you had, I mean, even Slot talked about this, when a game before you concede in the last second to make it 2-2, it's human nature to kind of like get squeaky bum time when it's 2-1 and like, here we go again kind of a deal.
Right.
Because I don't remember a lot of games. Like when you look back at the season, it's only a handful of games where we're like, that was easy. Because it feels like everything, it might be under control, but it was never, oh, that was too easy. Or am I just misremembering it along and just recent memory bias here?
I think I think when you look at this side for all the really good things it does, I think one of the things that we haven't really seen from this side is we haven't really seen very many what I would call complete performances. Like I think we've had a lot of performances where we've been dominant for a half and then sort of coasted through a match. And I don't know what the cause of that is. I suspect that will sort of improve over time as Schlott gets more of his players in, more of his system established. But like, I'm failing to think. I know there's a few in there, but I can't remember the last one where I felt like we really rode it start to finish in dominant fashion. When didn't have large swatches of the match where it felt like we were sort of like being reactive versus proactive.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the league, I can't remember the last time. I mean, the Spurs game, like most recently, that was a game where you were like, "Oh, this is done. This is fun,"
Yep.
kind of a thing, and kick back and watch. But in the league, it's really hard to remember like performances like that. I mean, okay, a part of it could be what you're saying, like the squad. I think while you have quality off the bench, right? I mean, you have depth and you have quality. It doesn't feel like a like for like sub when we do subs because he does not really have somebody that's just like Soboslai. I mean, aside from Jones, and because he was suspended this game, you don't have anybody you're like, I'll take this guy in, put this guy in. We might go a bit lower overall in terms of talents, but I'm getting the same thing. Even Endo, who had like a great game and had a huge impact in this game, it's not even a like for like. It's like a totally different than the other guys. You think that's why like we're seeing him kind of like riding the minutes now more and more on Gravenberg and McAllister, and you see games where like, I mean, this was like kind of like a tale of two halves. It was like a dominant performance in the first half. You would think we kind of like cruise that, make it 3-0 or kind of keep going it, but the second half, even with the subs, you just can't replace Soboslai, for example.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have players that are so like we do have some really really unique players in the side, right? When you look at what they do and what they do well. But yeah, I do agree with the fact that like when we have to make substitutions in a match, they almost require you to change tactically, right?
Yeah.
So I think that does make it hard. Like, so say you have a dominant first half, right? And you want to continue that dominance, but like when you want to sub in legs, you have to make some sort of tactical tweak that sort of upsets the apple cart, so to speak, in what you're doing. I thought that Slot did make a good point. Like he kind of, you know, I know he doesn't do this with the boys when it comes to training, but I think like he does a really good job like post match and sort of like getting his point across in a way that like I think is legitimate and really does have some value and does directly address the question, unlike Kerrigan. But I think uh, he does it in a way where he leaves out the stuff that's going to get talked about to the team, right? So like I think he conveniently left out the fact that like we were a turnover machine in the second half in the midfield, which
Yeah.
he could not have been happy about. But he did make a really good point that like in a versus side like Wolves in a game like this, when they come into the second half, they're when you are chasing a differential like that, you're able to make substitute and tactical decisions to chase a match that are risky, that force a team to make adjustments. And so I think that's what Wolves did, and we had to react to that. And the point that Schlatt was making is when we made those choices to react tactically to what Wolves were doing, we did. We were a disallowed goal in a that penalty that wasn't a penalty on Jota away from putting this match away. Any of
Yeah.
those things happen, you're talking 3-0, and this is probably a very different game, right? Until Cunha, of course, puts that banger in. But like at 3-0, if we get any of those things, I think this game does look really different. So and those are those fine margins, right? We had two opportunities, we didn't put them away. Wolves get one, we're on our heels, a squeaky bump down to the end of the game.
And look, Wolves, if this game was, yeah, I mean, Kevin says, watch the game versus Wolves, thought you guys, Kevin's a Crystal Palace dude. We were a bit lucky, but still a great win. I think, when you look at the Wolves game, for example, a Wolves team maybe like 10 weeks ago or something like that might play this as more of a damage control kind of game in the second half. Let's see if we nick one, and then if we don't. But they were able, I mean, at this time of season, you need a point. 0 doesn't do you anything, or a disaster doesn't hurt you any more than a 2-0 loss or anything like that. So they kind of went for it. And I think we've seen this in the past. I mean, the Big Six, we've seen this with City and stuff like that as well. Sometimes it's risky, but the best way to go at some of the big boys is actually go at them, because they're not as used to defending as much as, like more like trying to break it down and stuff. It is a risky proposition, and I think that's why, like you're saying, we could have gotten the third goal and stuff. But the night and day difference between first half and second half, is that a mentality thing where, let's face it, I kind of thought, okay, this one is done too, especially when the second goal came in. I was like, okay, we're good. You think they felt the same way and started looking ahead? Or is it just more the Everton game, like carryover? What was it? Is it tired legs? What is it?
I think this is a weird one, right? Like, I think this is a really weird one because I want to put it on complacency coming out second half because that's the easy thing to do. I don't know that it's that simple because when you look at, I mean, we lost 2-1 not long ago to Wolves. They gave us a hard time. Like, it was like 4 months ago. They gave us a hard time in that match.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Kevin should know Palace is a bogey team for us, right? Like, I think some of these teams play really, really, really well between the boxes. And maybe they don't have an apex striker, or maybe they don't have like, a colossus defender or like somebody that really sort of toes that back line. I think some of these mid to low level clubs don't have those key pieces in both boxes, but they cause problems in the middle of the park.
Yeah.
And I think, for us, like, I think they genuinely did that. I think they genuinely just caused us to be uncomfortable in that second half. And then, of course, Cunha, I think, is like a class above anybody in that side. There's a reason he's been looking to leave and trying to get out of that club for a while, and he probably deserves to be elsewhere. But I think once that goal comes in, then of course then I think like that complacency is replaced with a little bit of like I don't know if fear is the right word, right? But like I think uneasiness. And that's where you start to get a little bit, I think, dicey, and that seemed to be compounded. Like I felt like we started to turn the ball over, and that became to be almost like systemic throughout the second half there.
And I think it just became so, yeah, I mean, fear, I don't know, like you, like I'm struggling to find the word. It became very panicky Like,
Yeah.
it's just like, the entire last 15, 20 minutes became like the last 90 seconds almost. And, you give the ball back over and over again. I mean, I kind of said it this morning, but that has to be by far the most useless I have ever seen Nunez. Like, overall, from pressing to like just nothing, like literally just jogging around. One of us could have been out there and probably could have contributed more, it felt like, because it was just horrific. And those are the times where I'm like, dude, like your only strength and the only thing you bring is energy and pressing and running. So once you start jogging around, you might as well show up. I think that's when it's hurt. Like maybe, like normally we start with Gakpo, right? And then you shift kind of like Diaz to the left and stuff. You needed more players better on the ball, like who can kind of grab the ball, keep some possession. Or Gakpo, I think, is very valuable for that on the left-hand side. And when you have Diaz in the middle, he can do some of that stuff. And right, it just felt like when we especially pushed Szoboszlai out, there was no outlets. And then, Nunez would come back. Now we kick the ball away. Do you think that's just purely on panic, or is it like tiredness? Like, what was it? Because it was like, I think that's I'm more concerned with. Like, if you want to take a weakness from this game and kind of like project it forward, because when you play a team like Villa on Wednesday, who have like Asensio and stuff like that, like multiple players that maybe they don't play as a team yet, but that can hurt you. That can give you that moment of quality. I worry in those panic moments because I feel like we were reeling pretty heavily.
So, all right, talk me through this. What's your major concern there?
Not being able to hold the ball, I think. Even when I'm okay with saying, okay, come on, we're gonna sit back, we're gonna kind of like, keep our shape, and we're gonna kick your butt on the counter. Go ahead and come, because sometimes that works better for us, right? We can on the counter. I think we could not do the counter at all. Like, it was just, if it was the other way, like if it was a team at Anfield and we were doing what Wolves was doing, I think we would have said it's a matter of time. The goal is coming, attacking the cup end, it's about to come and stuff like that. I think my biggest concern was not being able to grab the ball and actually start those counters. Because if you're going to sit back, and we didn't give a lot of clear-cut chances, but if you're going to sit back, you got to be able to, when you get the ball, be positive with it. It felt like we were never positive with it.
Yeah, well, I think sort of like late second half, that was almost us being afraid to get countered and focused on putting numbers behind the ball. I'm with you. At times it feels like we're getting away from what got us off to such a great start, and that was really just learning how to, like, there's two ways to win a match, right? Like, obviously you're scoring, but you're also the way that you utilize the time that's on the clock, right? Like, sometimes you're, especially when you're winning, you're playing against the clock. And I think I think this is where it really hurt. I think, and I'm one of the few that still like tries to stick up here for Darwin occasionally, but I think this is where that performance really hurt us, because if you look at the difference between what Darwin did and what we can assume a player like Gakpo would have done coming in, I think that's a big difference, because I think Gakpo does a lot of those things that you need, where he drops deep and retains the ball and has that ability to either unlock the pass using the half space or switch the field when you need to. And I think he does a lot of those things. And I think that, like, Darwin essentially just played himself out of that match just on sheer positioning, not taking up good spaces, not making himself available. And so at times it felt like we were playing with 10. And so I think that really hurt. I do think, like, honestly, I want to hold Gravenberch and McAllister a little bit accountable. I think McAllister occasionally tends to be too adventurous in bad spots. And I didn't think Gravenberch really took leadership. And, like, we talked about how quietly good Gravenberch has been this season, and he has. I fail to think of another player whose baseline is as high as his. Like, his average performance.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Maybe Van Dijk, right? Like
Van Dijk probably, yeah.
Like their average performance is so quietly fucking good, you don't even realize like that they played outstanding because
I think we've talked about this before. Like when you do ratings, like their standard is already so high. Like they rarely get ridiculous ratings because that's what they do.
The one thing I'd like to see Gravenberch do is take more responsibility and more leadership in the middle of the pitch. I think sometimes he leans on Mo on the right and he leans on Verge behind him. And he kind of is sandwiched between these two big personalities and two big, well-established stars. I would like to see him sometimes take more onus on having everything run through him when we're in possession. We're trying to bleed a game out.
Yeah, the weird thing is with Gravenberch, I think like his impressive performances are usually like quiet performances where he's like, win and pass, turn and start an attack kind of a thing. And that's where he's at his best. It's almost like when you don't fully notice him, it feels like he's just doing his normal thing, but it's not like out of the ordinary. Because I know exactly what you're saying. He's kind of set that bar so high that you kind of take it as a given. He's going to intercept or he's going to like spin on the guy and then suddenly he's wide open. He's going to give it to Mo and stuff like that. And I kind of like how he distributes the ball and doesn't like try to do too much with it. I feel like sometimes Szoboszlai, for example, and I know they're different roles,
right?
But Szoboszlai feels like he should be doing more with it instead of, for example, giving it to a wide open Mo and like letting him do his thing and stuff like that. But yeah, like the midfield struggled. And that's what, like, I guess my concern is hopefully that's not the case, but I hope it's not tired legs. Or I hope it's not like what other teams are kind of figuring out about this midfield, because we can tweak stuff in the off season, but not in these last 12 games of the season here.
Well, listen, we've only got to be 6 points better than the second place team, right? So like, I think there's a lot of room here. I think we're fine. I just, I do worry about if these breaks start to not go our way, if there's a collective collapse that sorts of start. So you got to worry about that setting in, especially with a new manager. I think we're fine here, right? I mean, when you look at this, we came in with 3 points when we weren't on our best on a team that usually gives us a pretty tough play when we play them. I mean, I think the Everton match, like we could probably spend 2 hours on that match if we wanted to.
Yep.
At the end of the day, I thought we had a lot of bad breaks, justified and unjustified in that match. Draw last game away at Goodison Park. I'm okay with that. Anything happens in that match. We all know that that's sort of a bogey match that has fireworks and stuff. I mean, I'm even okay with the way it ended, honestly. I'm okay with the Reds that happened and stuff. And I think because sometimes as a team, when you go through those moments, I think that brings you closer together in a way. And like, listen, like the Jones red, I would, first of all, I love that red. I mean, just for the premise that you don't let another player do that to your fans in your city if you've grown up Scouts and seen that life, right? And secondly, I think you have to put that marker down in like demand that like baseline respect from your rivals. So I love that red. And I thought Oliver had a poor match, and I think his red on slot, I think that just tells you that he felt like he had a poor match, because that's how somebody who has had a bad day at the office reacts to somebody criticizing.
It's like a frustration foul in midfield, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
like when you see a boss write somebody up and you're like, gee whiz, that seems harsh. You're getting written up too. Like,
I guess we never get a chance to talk about like the Everton game on a Monday because obviously it was midweek. I know the biggest disappointment to me still was like it's felt so much in some ways like that Newcastle game where a draw was probably fair, but you almost felt like you escaped with a win.
Yeah.
And then I've been saying this all week, like the last guard on your way out, breaking away from prison, the last guard saw you're like, damn it, so you're right back in. But I mean, I've been counting. I mean, we were talking about it in like one of the morning shows where, I mean, I've been counting this game in hand for the Everton game, a point all along the way. I never was like, oh, it's Everton, it'll be 3 points, knowing it's away. I mean, we won like 2 out of 9 games or something crazy like that. And Not to mention the last game at Goodison and stuff, that only adds to the occasion. So I always took it as a point, and 7 points going into these last games. I mean, the biggest thing right now is the next 5 games, right? We're looking at the next 5 games here between like what we have and what Arsenal has. And here's another thing. We are kind of going again. We're kind of, I feel like, I don't know how you feel, Bickler, but in the title race, we're kind of, I mean, obviously, when you have the point leads, you only have to worry about what you do, right? I get that. But I feel like we are literally competing more against ourselves in this one rather than it's not like before when you had City, like somebody driving like, you know, like a semi behind you coming 100 miles an hour and you were like, holy shit, what is going on back there kind of a thing. You have an Arsenal team who I thought would have an easy time with Leicester away, and they really struggled. They get Marino to come in and score 2 crazy goals to kind of like pull the 3 points there. I don't see that Arsenal team with no forwards winning every match as well. So you're kind of competing against yourself in terms of going back to what you're saying, just do 6 points, 7 points less because you have the goal differential and stuff too than the guy behind you. When you look at these next 2 games, obviously we have 2 big ones. I mean, 3 big ones right off the bat over here. Away to Villa on Wednesday, then away to City, and then home against Newcastle. If we got 5 out of those 9, would you be worried? Meanwhile, they have home West Ham, away to Forest, which I think they lose points there. That's a game that I feel like they will lose points on. I had marked us to lose points there, so I feel like they will as well. And then away to United, that's a really weird one. They're so freaking bad, man. But it is United. These are the only games they circle on the calendar and play hard on. So,
yeah, I mean, I would, right? Just because I think that puts unnecessary pressure on the side, right? I think looking at that, I agree with you on Arsenal. I think they're going to have I think they're going to have a hard time consistently finding goals versus teams that they're going to need to score on. I think coming up, right? Like, I think City collectively is gaining some confidence, and that's not a side I want to see gain any more confidence. I still think they're really subpar defensively. I think with Villa, they're like winless in something like their last 5 league matches. So like they can score goals, but they have some fundamental like disconnections in that side, the way they're set up right now. I'm surprised they haven't done any sort of retooling to that midfield. They're continuing to play the old system, which I don't know if they have the pieces for. So I would be really disappointed to not come away. Like, I think that if we don't come away from 3, if we don't get 3 versus Villa, I think those are a massive 3 points to get. I think you have to have 3 versus Villa. I really think those are important because I think it puts you in a really bad spot if you don't come into a City match that you got to have. So,
yeah, because I feel like you need 4 out of those 2 for sure. Yeah. Right. So if you do not get 3 against Villa, that makes the City game a must win. And I don't want a City game must win, 100%. Regardless of, you know, I know they're going to be coming. I mean, they're playing Wednesday as well. And they're probably coming back from a disappointing trip to Madrid is what I assume. I mean, either way, they're coming from a really, really tough game themselves. Away from Madrid, and they have to put, you know, all their eggs in that basket. It's not like a game where they can kind of see what happens kind of a deal. But if you do get these 3 points on Wednesday, I think that's why I felt like the 3 points against Everton would have been huge because I didn't count on it. So that would have given you some leeway in these fixtures coming up over here. But like I say, I mean, I know they're not on the hottest run right now, but away to United and home Chelsea are not, and home Fulham really, because Fulham is a solid team as well, are not easy fixtures. So Marmoush doesn't play versus Madrid. Yeah, because he never made the list, right? He looks like a player. But let's look at a couple of the positives from the weekend, though. One, your boy Ando. You're the Ando fan club sitting president right now. I mean, this is exactly what we need him for. And I've been saying this for a while, like that Japanese Milner role. And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about after the Everton game. He was needed in that game in the same role that he played this game.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit like a jackknife in terms of what he can do, which is exactly what Milner did. You played him all over the place. He's got international captaincy experience. He's played across multiple leagues, got leadership. I loved what he did. You want him to go in and basically disrupt play, right? Either winning free kicks or giving them. Like I think you want him to do both as long as he's smart about it. Um, yeah, I mean, I also think that he gives you an additional layer of support in front of that back line, which just so happened to be really nice when you're bringing in a Kwanzaa and trying to get Kanate out of a situation where he's going to get a second yellow. So I thought that like the substitutions worked out favorably in that scenario. But yeah, absolutely agree with you. I thought he was tremendous. He gives you he can give you like a sterling 20 minutes when it's needed most. Like
Yeah.
in like sort of the big moments. Like I don't think the moments get too big for him, which I think it's pretty awesome to have on your bench.
He is and I think this is why he can play center back. He has, for a midfielder, and I know he's a defensive midfielder, but still, not every defensive midfielder has this. As a defender, you always think of the worst case scenario, and you were a forward. You're kind of thinking the best case scenario, kind of like Mo, hoping that ball will go over the left back 10 times in the Wolves game. I'm like, dude, that ball is that guy's not missing those headers. You're gonna have to challenge that. But as an attacker, you're kind of hoping for that best case scenario and chasing that. As a defender, you're kind of playing the worst case scenario, like that moment in the corner where he anticipates this guy could get past Robertson, because most midfielders would try to double it up and the dude would take on Robertson and go to the line. But he kind of anticipates things going wrong, I feel like, and he kind of plays accordingly. And I really like that about him. And I think it's like, yeah, he's a Fabinho type. I think, it's different in a way, but I think, yeah, it's the same style. Back in the day, he would have probably given Fabinho a lot of rest when that is what we needed. And I think Brian is right that Slot did learn from the derby, because, I mean, when we give him his credit for his substitutions, I think you kind of have to give the criticism when they're, because you and I know if Klopp is in that game on the sideline, we're getting these substitutions where Endo is coming in and then other center back is coming in, like the Lovren substitution, or Matip is coming in, like another center back is being thrown into the box knowing they're going to start loading the box. I think that was a mistake in terms of how we used our subs and did not really do that. Because Kwanzaa, which we should talk about too, because I think that's another positive to take away from this game, especially with Gomez out, looks like indefinitely over here. It's great for the kid to come in and not only bail Konata, like you said, but makes that crucial stop that we were talking with Matish this morning. It's kind of like that Milner open nets. Say, like, if you win the title, it could be one of the highlights of the season in terms of getting 3 points from that game.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought that Kwanzaa, in sort of a big spot, did amazingly well. I think, like he's starting to show, and I don't know if this is related to his confidence, if he's just slowly getting that back, but like I thought he started to show the anticipation that wasn't there like 3 or 4 weeks ago. Like, the fact that he's doubling back and getting back in front of these chances in the box before they happen. I thought all the way around, I just thought he played like tremendously well across that game. And, obviously, I think we were all bricking it when Kanate went in on that shoulder. For me, that's probably a second yellow. So I thought we kind of skirted one there.
It could have been a second yellow, right? I mean, it was harsh. I mean, the first yellow is stupid. If he takes the second one, that's a player who's not used to playing with a yellow. And I would agree that Konate's style is not really suitable for playing with a yellow. That's why you should avoid those early stupid yellows, because he's like, when he's defending, his challenges are always like very like based on strength, like shoulder to shoulder and like pushing people off and stuff. Sometimes can go overboard. I mean, I know we were talking a lot about the Discord channel. I don't think that's a stupid challenge. That's a challenge he has to make. He can't just let the guy have a free header there either.
I don't think it's a dumb challenge. I think when you go with your shoulder or you go with the forearm, but I think with you lean with a little bit of all of that, like you're really asking for it. I think it was how he leaned into that challenge that I thought was like where there was the argument for the yellow, because like, if you're just looking at the ball and you're making a play on it and your shoulder connects and you just happen to be 6'3" and the other guy's like shorter than you, like that's what happens. But I thought the fact that he led with an extended sort of forearm was what was going to put him in a bad spot. Oh, skated
I
through.
almost feel like it's hard. I don't know what you think, but it's harder to play with a yellow as a center back now, just because these like arms and stuff, like just natural motion. Dude, I watched Leeds Sunderland earlier today. Great game, by the way. Even though I wanted Sunderland to win, huge Leeds comeback at the last second and stuff. It literally felt like I was in a time machine and went back like 20 years ago and watching a game like 2 decades ago, like ridiculously physical, no VAR. It's just like whatever he called. And
the championship's a good time, I'll tell you.
But I'm like, a lot of I'm like, dude, that'd be a red, that'd be a red. That's definitely a card. That's definitely a card. I feel like in like the Premier League now that, especially with the arms and stuff like that, I don't understand how you're supposed to jump up like a stick with not using your arms and stuff. And I understand, but sometimes some of these, and people make a meal of it too.
Oh yeah, I think that's the biggest thing of it, is that everybody embellishes so damn much now. And then of course, like and then when you embellish it with VAR, you gotta slow it down. That makes it look worse. Like everything slowed down looks worse now.
I think because it does get, that contact to the face. I'll be honest, I was amazed we did not get something I was really worried. I know a lot of people were not, but I was worried about that Van Dijk on Richarlison challenge, because on another day, you never know which way that's going to go, because that did look like what's up, bro? Kind of like a hit on him first, like right beginning of the season. That's why I think like it's a lot easier to play with the yellow cards. But then again, he should not get that first yellow. I think that's for a player his age. He's got to be smarter than that.
No, I agree. If you're asking me, yes, doesn't need to be smarter than that for sure. Like, but yeah, and I mean, I think Konate is sometimes like, I think my thing with Konate is like, for all the good things he does, I think sometimes Konate forgets, like he's a little bit like a Saint Bernard who thinks he's a lapdog, like, and he forgets that he's like 230 pounds and 6'4". You know what I mean? And he'll just like go, like you'll see this when somebody's standing on the ball and he goes into a charge. Like if they post him up and back, like they have their back to him, he'll go straight into that charge. And it's like, dude, just the actual physics of your body, like, is going to get a foul called on you.
I think it's like, when you watch him, actually, I don't know if you caught it, but Liverpool, like the club channel had the show with him, Jota, and McAllister. A couple of interesting things out of that, actually. Like, let me like bounce it off of you. First of all, Konate. I mean, when you watch a lot of these things, you can kind of tell he's like a goofy dude, and he's always like the jokester and stuff like that. But as you listen to him, some of the things he was saying, like some of the perspective he has on things, you can see why he was the captain of his national team despite his age and stuff. Within that jokester, I feel like, like when you're a jokester, and I anticipate you as a young guy like that too. I was too, like always getting in trouble. People don't take you as seriously maturity wise or depth wise, because they feel like, you're always like joking and stuff. I feel like you listen to Konate in that thing, and like he's like well above his years, dude, like in terms of his perspective and big picture stuff.
Well, I think the thing that Konate has is almost similar to the thing that Gakpo has, where he came through very prestigious soccer academies at a very young age. It's like the opposite of Darwin, right? Like he came through as footballing blue blood all the way from a very, very young age, 9, 10, 11, all the way through his teen years, was involved in the French national, side and system since he was very, very young teen years, and has sort of been groomed for the captaincy along every step of those ways. So I think in a lot of ways he's had just sheer exposure, not only to like just the best of the best from a coaching standpoint, but he's been surrounded by some of the best leaders in football. So I think all of those things really impact the way that somebody develops in football. And I think those are the things as like casual supporters and fans, we don't really think about, like in terms of like temperament and personalities on a lot of these players that come through. When they're living at academies from a very, very early age, so much of who they are as a player and how they develop has to be in which academy setup they're at and which players are around. And, he's just had the luxury of being around some of the best, just like Gakpo has.
So are we learning through these experiences, or is it just isolated cases that the sooner these players are in that kind of an environment, like you cannot teach that stuff afterwards, similar to what we're getting out of Darwin now? I don't want to generalize on South American players, because I think it depends on like what club they're in, how soon they go to Europe, or what kind of an environment they go to in Europe makes a difference, and probably like the upbringing and stuff like that too. But it just feels like that stuff is becoming like, obviously some certain stuff is harder to teach once you've got the fundamentals down and you come to a certain age, but it feels like a lot of the stuff, especially to be in a league like Premier League, is becoming even more difficult to teach and improve on. Not to mention these guys don't get that much time to improve on it.
Yeah, I think there's a legitimate point to be made there. I do think that some of this has to do with natural temperament. Like, you look at, we use Darwin as example, but I'll use two other South American players, and Bobby and Suarez, right? Like, both come up through the ranks, both come up, they come overseas, they play in sort of work their way into the Power Five leagues before they get poached into the Premier League, right? I think both of those players did not come up in sort of this blue blood royalty footballing sort of inner circle that you see in some of these European countries. But I think the difference between, I think that you can develop, I think that you can catch up players technically. I don't know that you can catch them up from a leadership standpoint. And you look at players like Bobby, and like Bobby kind of became a leader by default as kind of a quiet sort of voice, but like he wasn't really ever. That was I think Bobby benefited from being in a side with big personalities, right? So, and I think if you look at Suarez, you could say he had some leadership qualities, but they weren't like sort of the things that you want in a captain for obvious reasons. I think the things that you got from Suarez and the things that I loved about Suarez is that he made everybody around him great, not because he was a great leader or mentor, but because he didn't accept anything else. Like he played the same way that he practiced, as in like he was probably just as pissed off leaving the training pitch if y'all didn't win your 4v4 than you were if you didn't go win your game at the weekend, right? And even for like in being in a Liverpool side that was very, very average, a mid-table side, really, right? Like he kind of bridged that gap into the Brendan years by like, I think, bringing something that we didn't get a whole lot of outside of Stevie G, and that was just the demand for excellence. And I think that's kind of like an intrinsic quality. I don't think that's necessarily taught at the academy.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, I think that's kind of like how much drive you have. Sometimes it might look psychotic levels, but it's how much drive you have. I think, like, for example, like Mo is that kind of a player.
The Kobe, the Michael Jordans, like those players that like there's a different level to those players, and it's not necessarily always healthy, but it's what makes them great.
Yeah, when you listen to like some of like the Kobe stories, it's just like literally psychotic. But it's not only like when you see some of these players, you're always like, oh, well, God-given talents or physical ability and stuff like that. But the amount of work that goes into it, I thought, going back to that thing when I was watching, like and I've heard this from multiple players, but McAllister was also talking about Mo. And in terms of like the example he sets in terms of how you take care of yourself, how you approach professionalism, like whether it is like watching what you eat, how you work out and stuff like that. And those are things that, we don't see because it's not yelling and screaming on the pitch. But sometimes it goes back to what you're saying, like what we sometimes see from the outside as a temper tantrum or lashing out is actually connects to everything they see behind the scenes in terms of demanding that excellence and working hard, and like, I did not work my butt off for you to do this kind of a deal.
Yep.
And I think that's like the hard thing to replace, really. But I mean, I think some players have it, some players don't, and that's why, you know, leadership changes. I've actually been really impressed with like Van Dijk's, like how he's grown into the captain role, for example.
100%. Night and day difference between night and day difference between this year and last year. The finger pointing's gone. Like, even the way that he takes corrective action on the pitch is completely different. Yeah, it's just.
Where do you think that is from? Is it just like a learning curve, or he was trying to do what Hendo was doing, but everybody's a captain in a different way?
It could be that he thought that this side wanted what Hendo brought to the pitch, and then he just realized that that wasn't his style, or that didn't really work. I do think to some level it's easier to appear less frustrated when you're less frustrated. And I think that this side is defensively so much better cohesively because of what we do and build in front of it. You know, like, we build out of the back, but it's a solid platform in the midfield that's really designed to withhold and sustained possession in a way that really is a lot more comfortable for a defense. And so I think it's easier for him, probably the captain, when they're not conceding 2 or 3 times a match, which is where you probably got a majority of the finger pointing. But I do think that there is some significant growth there. And I do think, like, I think part of it is the side is just playing better. I do think there's growth there. I think maybe Arne Slot has something to do with it. You know, like, you have I think he brings a different temperament. As much as I loved Jurgen, he breathed a whole lot of life into this club. He gave this club a sense of community again, but he ran super hot and cold. And I think sometimes that's contagious in big matches.
I mean, that's what I was going to ask you, because as you were saying that, that's what I was thinking. Do you think it's a difference between just styles? Like, when you have Klopp style, you maybe do need the Tasmanian devil in the middle of the pitch, like yelling and screaming and running around and stuff like that. Whereas when you're playing a style, maybe, you know, it could be that Van Dijk said, okay, I can't be him, I'm just going to be me, and this is what works. Or it could be what Van Dijk is, calm as you like, is more suitable probably for Slot style in terms of overall temperament.
That feels like a coincidence to me. I mean,
you think so? Okay.
I see what you're saying. It does feel like a coincidence to me, because I think that you can play helter skelter and heavy metal football and have leadership be quiet and less chaotic. I think you can get that. I think that the side benefited from a very vocal Henderson. I think that I want to say that this feels more like a combination of frustration and Verge not having that experience before, in seeing essentially 7 years of Hendo do that, right? Yeah. So, I mean, that's what it feels like to me. But I mean, you could be onto something. I do think I think the play style and I think the manager style certainly factor in. I don't know that that's like I think it's probably a combination of all of those things. But I think the point that we wanted to really hammer on here, and I think the point that's probably the most important to make to anybody listening, is that, like, we talked about who is going to take on and be the leader in the side, right? And I think the biggest thing is like, when we got Verge as a captain, there were some things that we were really, really not pleased with. And I think the important thing here is that we have seen growth in a capacity that I think really benefits this side, not only for now, but for when he renews his contract.
Yeah, that will get done. Don't even open that window. Don't even freaking open that window. Let me address this. So this says the background of poverty and gang demographics motivates these players for success and escape. I think, like, you know, some of the poverty levels, especially that, you know, like African players or South American players and stuff like that come out of. Well, first of all, it takes a lot of work and a lot of risk and a lot of dedication to get there, right? I mean, and you have to be lucky. You have to meet the right people. I guarantee you there are a ton of players over there who could potentially be better than the ones playing in the Premier League, but it's a matter of opportunity, luck, you know, taking risks or whatever. I mean, you hear, like, you know, like you used to hear like Mane's story about like basically running away and stuff like that. So I think those guys are more grateful to it. I guess my biggest thing is I feel like if they do not do that early, it's a lot harder to get adjusted to like more technical approach to the game, more tactical approach. Because I feel like it's getting more and more like tactical, like very nuances tactical. It was always there was always tactics.
So
But
I
I feel
think
like there's more nuances now.
I think to Susie's point, I think demographics can play like a pretty important part in a player getting discovered, right, in their path into professional football. Do you think demographics play a part in what, like, in greatness, like in motive, like, like the thing, like the Kobe thing that separates people? Because I can tell you, Kobe came from a pretty affluent family. Grant Hill came from an affluent family. Christian Leitner came from an affluent family. And I know these are American basketball players and probably lost any European listeners, but like, I could probably, like, Erling Haaland.
I think you were going good with Kobe and then
Yep.
Grant Hill, but then when you went down to Christian Leitner and stuff, that's where you probably lost a lot.
Yeah, I probably just dated myself as a Michigan basketball fan. But, like, I mean, you look at Erling Haaland, like, I mean, even what's his name at Arsenal, Odegaard, affluent family,
But
like.
okay, I think I know what you mean, but the other examples are a lot more. I think those people are a lot more like resilient because they've had to fight so many more battles. One, they're more thankful for the opportunities they get, I think, and they try to make more of them because they know they're far and few between. And two, I think they're a lot more resistant to, like, I don't want to say rejection, but failure, I guess, right? Like, because gotta try it again, because they probably had to go through a lot more. I think when you name like those names, I think it's far and few between, and some of them, and I've seen it. I mean, we talked about soccer in America a lot of times where some people just have better circumstances to develop in than others, right? So it helps, but I think in most cases you hear the other stories. Do you think it's because it's better stories to tell, or those that are more of I mean, because it's not a great story to tell. It's like,
I think there might be
his
something to the
butler used to
resiliency
practice
thing.
with him every morning, so that's not a fun story to tell others.
I think there may be something to the resilience thing. I think what I'm kind of in a roundabout way getting to is that I think that greatness, like the true greats, the guys that are like next level, I think that that's an intrinsic thing, and I don't think it's necessarily related to demographics. Like, I think that you can have an internal drive and come from a position of wealth and privilege, and maybe that drive is internal because you never felt you were good enough at home. Maybe you never felt like you were going to measure up to your dad, who is a investment banker and super wealthy. And like, never, like, I think that there's pieces for everybody that drives that has that intrinsic drive. And that's nothing to take away from these phenomenal stories, like from all these South American and African players that literally have to risk life and limb to get over to the continent. Like, but I think that next level greatness does come from something intrinsically that may not necessarily be tied to that. And I think to the next level, when a player hits that next level and they get money, I think at the end of the day, like, can't remember who the Pat receiver, I think it was Troy Brown from the New England Patriots, said something. Money just makes you more of what you already are, which I think is like really interesting. Like, if you're a hard worker, it makes you work harder. If you're lazy and you're trying to like milk a contract and you just want to see, it just makes you more of what you are. And
I think it shows the level of drive, right? Like, was your drive to just make money or be really, really, really good at what you're at, or to like reach your potential kind of a thing? I think that's that's a good quote though, because I think that's very accurate, because it really shows the level of your drive. And that's why we always talk about, I don't know if we talk about it as much in soccer. That's weird, right? I mean, we talk about it a lot in American sports where it's the contract year. We don't talk about it as much. Well, first of all, because the contracts are not guaranteed, probably. But also the fact that it's not like that. I know maybe there's more competition, more drive. I know what it is. We don't talk about it as much, I feel like, in soccer, where we say, "Oh, it was his contract year, so he had like a really good year." We say it a lot in American sports.
Yeah, it is true. I think it is just a fundamental difference in the way that contracts work in soccer, especially now that more and more clubs are just like the players have the leverage for the most part, and they're just winding contracts down a lot of times. So I do think that is partially the case. It's an interesting thing. When I heard it, I can't remember. I heard that probably like a year ago, and it really stuck with me because it you can apply it to anywhere in your life, right? When somebody comes into a lot of money, like you see if they're a kind, generous person, they usually are more kind and more generous. If if there's somebody who keeps themselves and is sort of self-absorbed, like that comes across more. Like it's just very interesting.
And honestly, in some ways, perhaps, guys who are already had the resources, it should be in some ways even more impressive that they have that drive to continue. And because you can consider like it came to them easy and stuff. This is what happens when Gally is not here to keep us on track over here. We went all over the place. Gally would have brought us back to the Villa game. Let's talk about the Villa game real quick. What kind of a lineup are you expecting out of this, knowing that City is also going to be coming from a tough game when we play the weekend? Or I don't even know do you think that kind of figures into it?
I don't think there's going to be a lot of rotation between the Wednesday and Sunday match. I really don't. I think you got to be looking at your first starting. I think you got to be looking at your strongest starting 11. I think what I'm most worried about is that even though he's been playing better for the most part, I don't know, last match is the greatest example, but I am worried we're back in the fold where we're running the legs off of Bravo. Like this will be like, he's. I think this will be like 5 matches in a row for him in the last
Do you kind of look at the weekend game and say, well, I want Robo to go against City, so I'm gonna have to sadly roll the dice with Costas?
If I was gonna roll the dice anywhere in that side, that's probably where I would roll it. I think. Is there any weirder job in all of football than being Liverpool's number 9? Because I think that's the thing. I don't know what you do there. I don't know what the answer is. Is it better to bring Darwin off the bench? Do you roll out Jota again? Because the moment we moved Diaz to the left wing, he started doing Luis Diaz things like he was 2 years ago, and looked a lot more comfortable out there. So, did we lose a lot of Diaz at the expense of having him as a de facto number 9 for a period of time? And now that's Jota's, which just really brings us back to the Darwin conundrum. I think for me, it's the first starting 11 for me is probably going to have Jota in the 9, and it's going to have Robo in left back. And I think those are the 2 places I probably look to versus Villa to maybe switch it up, be ready for City. Because as much as I love Jota, I almost want to have that coming off the bench for City.
The problem with Nunez is, one of the problems with Nunez is we used to talk about it. I think this was early last year, right? We were like, Gakpo to start, Nunez off the bench, because that was mostly built on if we're chasing a game, that's when you want him to come in, cause some havoc, and see what happens, do what he did at Brentford and stuff. And I really do think, as much as I have not been this angry at a player in a while, Angie was kind of worried about the sounds and things that was coming out of me on when I was watching that game, and it was mostly at Nunez. I feel like he's the worst guy to come in when you're protecting a lead because he looks so lost and he's trying so hard to do his forward things rather than we're going to sit back in our shape and counter. Like, it's going to come. Just wait. He's not that kind of a player that is going to look at the big picture and say, hey, we stay in shape. When we win the ball, I'm going to go. I'm going to use my speed. He's more like, let's go. I got to do some forward things. And I feel like now we've kind of like switched it where I would feel more comfortable Nunez starting, given, Gakpo's probably going to be out. And then Jota coming off the bench, because you can have Jota do both, chase a game and finish in the box, or hey, you know what, we're gonna sit in shape. I need you to kind of like be the 9 sometimes, hold the ball, earn a cheap foul, buy some time, whatever it might be.
So you're starting Darwin. That's what I hear.
Yes, and that's by choice. It's almost like because I feel like it's the better Darwin. Like, if I'm going to have Darwin, because you have to, because Gakpo is out, I'd rather have that Darwin than the one that came. God,
Yeah.
what was that? And I know he has been better, but it was so freaking bad. Like, so I thought Sobosai was just gonna slap in middle of the pitch because he was always in the wrong spot defending, and Sobosai was like throwing his arms around because then suddenly Sobosai would have to run over to cover his guy. His guy would be open. Yeah, I would hate to play with him.
Here's the conundrum. Here's the problem. Like the tough part about Darwin too, right? So let's say you start him out of so if you don't start him, you're asking him to come into a game and basically figure out pace of play, positioning, ongoing tactics, and every game when you come in has a little bit of a different feel to it, right?
Yeah.
And you're asking him to feel that out in short order and figure it out. And I think there's one thing that we've consistently knocked Darwin on besides being offsides, it's his football intelligence. And I think what you're asking him to do leans into the one thing that we knock him on if you're bringing him off the bench, right? And so that's the struggle with him. I don't know what the answer is. I think that the summer is probably going to answer a lot of questions for us in terms of what Orange Slot thinks.
Yeah, I think the writing is on the wall on that one. But I do still think there's 1 or 2 moments from Nunez coming rest of the season, whether it's in the league or the Champions League or whatever, where he gets like a crazy goal that is needed and stuff like that. I mean, normally I find it, it's a very easy guy to root for. I could have killed him in the Wolves game, but I just had no idea what he was doing. Like, he's like, what are you doing? Like, do you even know what is going on? It just looked like you put a volleyball player out there and be like, hey, you're athletic, get out there. That's what it looked like. He had no clue where to be, what to do. Yeah, it was very confusing. Jones, do you think he gets the starting spot, having gotten full-blown rest and probably good to go now?
I think that's probably be really good shout, actually. He may. At whose expense, though, is
that's the question, yes. Who is the one who takes a seat?
Because I think that's the crazy thing. McAllister, Gravenberch, and Soboslai do such uniquely different things in that midfield, and all three of them are sort of irreplaceable for what they bring, right? So I guess I could see Jones versus Villa. I could see that. I think if I'm putting Jones versus Villa, it's for Gravenberch. I think at some point you got to get Gravenberch some minutes. If I want minutes, I want them fresh for City.
Have we ever had Jones and Mecca start together?
I don't know that we have.
I was just thinking about that. I don't know, like, if he's done the Gravenberch, but I agree to that. And I think because you do need a fresh, and here's what you can do. You can always put in Gravenberch and then push Jones up and rest Szoboszlai and stuff like that. So you get rest from both sides, kind of an ordeal. So I think that would be a lot smarter move to do, because then you want to have those guys be able to be, in good shape going into the City game. Early prediction for that Villa away game?
You know what? I say we squeak it out 2-1.
2-1. Yeah, I agree with that 2-1. These 2-1s are just freaking killing me. It is not good for me, but I think this is a tough away game. I guess, like I say, my biggest worry is they have some guys that if you have a brain fart, that they can really hurt you. They have skill to be able to really hurt you. So that would be like the big one for me. But yeah, let's hope for a win, because honestly, every 3 points gets us a week closer to the ultimate goal over here. Well, thanks a lot, Bickler. Thanks a lot to all those joining us tonight. Do give us the thumbs up, like, share, and all that good stuff. There will be no morning show tomorrow, but we'll be back bright and early. Actually, no, I'll be back tomorrow night with the panel show. We have a full panel and a lot to discuss. But have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you guys next week. Take care.